and welcome to another edition of the Big Knick Energy podcast. First off, check out our sponsor, Empire Original Designs at jointheempire.com, the East Coast #1 challenge coin manufacturer, home of challenge coins, lapels, pins, patches, keychains, bottle openers, and more. Mention our podcast, Big Knick Energy, via email for 5% off purchases. Once again, that's at jointheempire.com. I'm your host, Joe Yolk, the Bald Kid Wonder. There is still no mastermind this week as Angelo is working and marketing his bald life way. And our very special guest, a contributor to the Daily Knicks fan-sided page, Elite Sports New York, and The Playrounder, co-host of the Hoops Addicts Anonymous podcast, and a school psychologist is his full-time job, Geoffrey Campbell. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. That was a fantastic intro, Joe. I appreciate it. I haven't been talked, that fondly in quite some time, so I appreciate it. I'm starting this off on a high note for sure.
I try my best, man. If I can make every guest feel good at the beginning, that usually goes well from there. For everyone that wants to know, you can also find Jeff's articles and opinions on the Knicks and other NBA topics. His personal thing is at muckrack.com/Jeffrey-Campbell/articles. First and foremost, Jeff, I think we both want to wish RJ Barrett a very happy 21st birthday.
100%, man. I hope he's chilling on the beach somewhere with a cocktail or a nice cold brew, whatever he prefers. Yeah, man, I still can't believe at times that this kid is 21 years old and we have him hopefully for the foreseeable future. But yeah, shout out to RJ Barrett and happy 21st.
I agree with you entirely. I'm glad we have him for the foreseeable future. Only person I hope he doesn't actually hang out with right now on the beach is Joakim Noah.
Yeah. Yeah, he said NYC was too lit for him. So yeah, I agree with you.
That is crazy. That dude's like a supposed womanizer in Chicago. He couldn't handle New York.
And we were, well, up until the end of this year, we were still paying him. So
I think we still owe money next year. I think it's still.
Oh yeah, maybe next
year. I think it's one
last.
more. You're not a Mets fan as well, are you? I know you're from Astoria, but
no, yeah, I'm Yankees, Yankees and Knicks. And what's the other
football?
Oh, Giants, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, it would have been funny if I said football and you're like, oh, Islanders.
Yeah.
Jeff, before we get into the Knicks stuff specifically, how have you been enjoying the rest of the playoffs since our beloved team got knocked out?
It's been all right, man. I listen, I'm not going to lie at all. I've certainly been taking some joy and delight in seeing Trae Young get his ass handed to him.
Tell me about it.
But it's been an interesting playoffs for sure. Like I was doing a previous pod with some guys that I know well. We were doing our all NBA squads. And interestingly enough, none of us had Donovan Mitchell on any of the three teams. And he's just been lighting it up this playoffs. And he's kind of one of those stars or superstars that's kind of under the tier of like the really elite players in the game.
Yeah.
He kind of goes under the radar sometimes. Watching him play has been great. Just been enjoying watching teams without having like the extreme stress and anxiety of just like clinging to the Knicks and hoping that they do well and not having your day just absolutely suck when they don't.
Yeah.
So I've been enjoying that for sure.
Word. Yeah. The Knicks losing the night before that Hawks series was trash. What do you talking about Trae Young specifically? Why do you think Philly's been able to, not mentioning Elfrid Payton obviously, but why do you think Philly's been better at attacking him than we were?
They have length at every position. They have height and length at every position, and when it comes to their defense, they're deep. Like I think we have a couple of solid defenders here and there, and from a team perspective, I think we do a good job executing a scheme. But just from that point of attack, right? Like if you don't have that point guard, like Ben Simmons obviously is.
Yeah.
And I forget if he was runner up this year, or I'm sure he was top 3 for defensive player of the year. But yeah, man, that's really going to change the game. And Trae just can't get away with some of the stuff that he was able to against us.
Agreed. The thing that like we had Reggie Bullock on him a lot, obviously, and Reggie Bullock would be like their 4th or 5th best perimeter defender. Like Simmons and Thibault, obviously, but I would even say Danny Green usually is a better defender than Bullock is at times. So that's the only issue I've ever had. That's why we kind of lost. I've talked about the Hawks so many times in the past 3 podcasts though. Next thing I wanted to ask you more on the psychology base, because one thing that gets mentioned a lot from Knicks fans and like anyone that's watched the Coach Thibodeau team in the past is that Thibs usually quotes unquote runs his players into the ground during the regular season. You're shaking it. We've all heard it. Why do you think? I don't actually think that's what happened this year, but if you were to attest why we did so much better in the regular season and then the postseason, it's like we did run out of gas a little bit. What would you attribute that to?
Um, yeah, it's funny. I was just reading a quote today, and I forget which GM it was from. Oh, it actually might have been Bob Myers of the Warriors, and I don't think it was this postseason that he was being asked because the Warriors aren't in the playoffs. But he was saying that in the regular season, when you swing the ball around and you might get it to an open guy, and that space or proximity between the closest defender and your shooter might be like 2 feet
Yeah,
in the regular season, but in the playoffs it's like 2 inches. Everybody plays a lot harder, and I don't want to say like we kind of just suffered a bit because teams in the regular season don't play as hard. But I think we're a team that the margin of error for us is so thin for the most part that we had to play at our effort level always had to be elite, even if our talent wasn't elite.
right.
So because of that, I think once the other teams that were more talented started to bring their effort level up, it messed with us a little bit. But from a Tibbs standpoint, like I really don't buy into the fact. I feel like it's low hanging fruit to say that because he's a really tough coach and tough minded, and he expects a lot of his players that makes players, it's overbearing or it tires them down. I really believe that all of these guys that come to the league, the majority of them are, alpha competitors that really want someone to push them and get the best out of them.
Right.
And I think Tibbs does that. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's that podcast that Josh Hart was on, and I think Kyle Lowry was on there as well. And Kyle Lowry said, Tibbs is my guy. Tibbs is my favorite. Like guys, the real great competitors, they don't shy away from the coach that is also a really great competitor and happens to know the game really well.
Right. You would imagine more players. That's a good point. I want more players would want to have a guy that wants to play them 40 minutes a game anyway. Like you said, they're usually everyone in the NBA for all major sports for that matter is the best of the best of competition. They're used to wanting to be the best and striving to be the best. Uh it's weird that it ever gets sounded like players don't want a coach that pushes them as hard as possible. Um do you have any examples of like, I mean, I don't know any of the top of my head, any examples of players that like really didn't like being pushed that have been under Tibbs or like anyone else from Knicks history recently?
I guess the only really popular one is Carl Anthony Towns when he's in Minnesota, right? And I guess there was rumors that they were clashing a bit.
And
Uh,
Butler.
and I'll say this, I on my podcast I had a guy, Kyle Racky, who's a really cool dude. I think he has a website called Zone Coverage, and he used to be a credentialed reporter for the Timberwolves. And he did say that second season that Tibbs was in charge, or maybe it was after the second season, whichever season they made the playoffs and then struggled the year after.
Right.
He said the mood around the locker room was really rough, like down, and that is a legitimate criticism that people have had of Tibbs that he's had to address, that he only has one speed, right? It's push hard all the time. This,
Right.
this is your job. This is work. We're not here to have fun. We're not here to make friends. But, people recently have said, even Derrick Rose or people that have worked with him in the past, like Tibbs is, he's been a little bit lighter in that sense. You see him smiling around the players a lot more. He's let his assistants have more control and more of a role in terms of dictating how practice will be, or maybe how players spend their off days, more team building activities, whatever it is,
Right.
right? So like Towns is really the only player that I can think of that really clashed with him. And I don't even want to say like he didn't want to be pushed as hard. I don't know that. It certainly seems that from what's been reported. But man, I don't know. Like I definitely think if you're a player that really kills it on the offensive end, but your defense is suspect, and you feel like pushing yourself defensively is going to take away from your offense, you probably don't want Tibbs because he's going to expect that of you.
Right.
But to even counterpoint that real quick, like look at Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine is not known for his defense, and he played under Tibbs. And every report that I've read says that he loves Tibbs. He was like, no, like we were a legit team when he was there, and like I enjoyed playing with him. So
Yeah.
I think it's just I don't know. It's hard to tell.
To the Zach LaVine thing too, when Tibbs was on Minnesota, Jimmy Butler obviously loved him because Jimmy Butler is someone that tries really hard all the time, day in and day out. And then Andrew Wiggins, even while he's been on the Warriors, has said in the past that he's actually like, I would play for Tibbs again. I do appreciate what he did for my career. So it is interesting that Towns is the only one that actually ever had negative publicity out of it in hindsight. Because at the time, Wiggins also was someone that like he's a little young, maybe he doesn't want to play that hard,
Right.
stuff like that. Um, yeah, that's really good. Going to the next thing I wanted to ask you, because obviously since it is the Knicks off season now, which is since it's the second round playoffs, it is a little sad, but farther than we usually get. We're both on Twitter. Obviously, Twitter is where most crazy ideas happen when it comes to free agents, rumors, stuff like that. How hard is it to actually sift through what has merit from a rumor standpoint versus like what is total crap from either it's an agent or like a player's distant relative, stuff like that?
I mean, I think it's really hard. Like, I know there's a lot of people on Nick's Twitter who pretty much go by the rule. Like, if I didn't hear it from Begley or someone like that, like I'm not listening to it.
Woj, Shams, or Begley. That's
Right.
it.
So Woj, Shams, or Begley, like I think that's your pretty safe bet if you're really trying to sift through all the BS out there. But the thing is, you always have to look at it because you never know who is behind the report. Like it could be someone from somebody's camp, trying to maybe angle or push their, hey, I love how my free agent would look in this place, or I like what they're doing. So you always have to look at
Also,
it.
the
But
cap space we have available.
yeah, listen, so that's again, that's why we're going to be linked to every player because we have so much cap space available. We're able to do a lot of things, whether it's take on a bad contract like a Kemba Walker or something like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully with some picks attached. But because we have so much flexibility, we're going to be involved in every trade scenario, every free agent trade scenario, every bad contract that maybe a team is looking to offload. Like
Right.
we're going to be at the center of all of it. So it's just a matter of like I feel like you kind of have to trust that it's two things because on one hand I trust the front office to be prudent um and look at things with like a real critical eye and find the right move. At the same time, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but one thing that really sticks out in my mind was Derrick Rose's post game press conference when we got bounced out of the playoffs. He was like, "Listen, I would love to be back,
Yeah.
but I know this front office has big plans." So it makes me feel like I feel like we're gonna swing for something. I feel like there's gonna be something that happens. I just don't know what. But hopefully it's a move that we have leverage and we're able to really benefit from it.
Having multiple first round picks and 8 picks in the next 3 years, and then all the money we have definitely puts us in a better position, probably than every other team that's not OKC. Maybe even better than them, honestly. How much I'm actually because the front office is so much better than it has been for us in the years past. How much better do you think Leon Rose and Worldwide West are specifically to actually sift through that stuff and like avoid the agent talk? Because agents are a lot of times the ones that like leak this stuff out. And Leon Rose obviously was on that side for so many years. How much better do you think they are actually being able to play the game since they're on the GM side now?
I honestly, man, like I think if anything, that's where they're gonna excel. Like when I first heard about Leon Rose getting hired, I mean the extent of my knowledge of him was very limited. Like all I knew is that he formerly repped Melo and that he was one of the biggest names in, being an agent, right? Like
Right.
he led CAA and we all know what
And
type
like
of.
all the sports, not just basketball.
Yeah, exactly. So like I didn't really know that much like my initial reaction was like, wow, here we are hiring and giving a boatload of money to someone who doesn't have experience in this position where we need someone with experience to run a basketball operations and put people in place who can also run a basketball operations. But I mean, like, I think if anything, Leon, I think the thing that I'm most optimistic about or confident in is that he's not going to get taken advantage of. Like him and Worldwide West together, like you're not going to like outshark them. So that's the thing that I'm kind of confident about in the sense that like there's not going to be Danny Ainge isn't going to be calling to fleece them like he did the Brooklyn Nets. You know what I mean? And
Well,
like so
thankfully, Danny Ainge ain't calling anyone anymore.
exactly, he's not he's going to be calling somebody else. But I like I'm not. That's the one thing I'm very confident about. Like we're not going to see the Woj bomb and be like oh, shit, like that really.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident that's not going to happen.
Speaking of the front office and for Leon Rose, if you were them, throwing your GM cap on for a sec, talking about our best player this past year, Julius Randle, would you give him the contract, the 4,106,000 or 116 this year? Would you let him play the next year, the last year of his deal? Would you wait till next year? What would you do if you could?
So I would definitely offer him the 4 years 106. What I think maybe should happen, and I think it benefits both sides, and I got to give credit where credit is due. Jeremy Cohen, who writes over at the Strickland, he does a lot of salary cap stuff, and this is really from his article specifically. I feel like this, even though Julius Randle, I think is going to be keen on getting money this off season. I think that these players, I do believe that they care um, kind of where their status is and what kind of salary they have in comparison to the other elite players in the game.
Absolutely.
So if Julius signs 4 years 106 now, I think that's great for the team, but I don't know how great it is for him. And what I think a way to kind of satisfy both Julius and the Knicks, if you gave him a 2 year extension now with a player option, he would still be able to hit free agency again before he's 30, I
Go
think.
the LeBron James route.
Right. So if he's open for, then if he's eligible for another 4 or 5 year extension worth over 200 mil, I think that enables Julius to be somewhat secure for the near future, right? And he's still going to be a Knick, and he clearly wants to,
Yeah.
and he's a part of the culture. And you see his kid on TV all the time with the front office, like they've clearly prioritized him. And so I think that deal, maybe a 2+1, is a way to
Yeah.
satisfy both needs while saying, hey, Julius, we're still going to give you a chance to really cash out before you're 30 so that this doesn't limit your earning potential. So I think that that's something that I think maybe should happen. I just don't know. It's just, I'm so interested to see if Julius just says, no, listen, I'm going to play this year out and I want to try and earn, I want to bet on me
Right.
or
Try to get the super max.
exactly. So I'm so interested, but I think a 2+1 would be the best situation for both.
Why is it that why do you think more players don't actually go for the 1-1 or the 2-1 with the player option being the +1 these days, especially with how good like technology and health is and stuff like that? They very rarely get like the terrible Achilles tendon injury anymore and never come back. Like KD's as good as he was prior. Why don't you think more players actually do the 2-1 versus going for the super?
I'll be honest, I don't 100% know. If I had to say, I think it really depends a lot on where you are in your career. Um, like if I'm Julius, right? But again, like these players don't think like you and I. Like I might think more security than
Right.
he does. But in his mind, he probably thinks, well, I always had this production in me all my career. It's just it wasn't brought out. So for him, this ascension to being one of the top power forwards in the game is not an aberration in his mind, right?
Yeah.
For us, it's like, wow, being in your seventh year in the league, being an all-star for the first time, maybe all NBA candidate, that's pretty crazy. So like I think, if you're a younger player or maybe a player that's really struggled and you have that 4 year deal in front of you, I think that's hard to say no to because there's long-term security, annual salary that's locked in, maybe you throw some incentives in there and it boosts up the final amount. But if you're a LeBron James and you are the league, it really makes sense to do a 2+1 or a 1+1 because you ultimately want to have the freedom to go wherever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want,
Yeah,
because you move everything.
most
Everything
leverage
comes
possible.
from you. So I think that's why maybe most players they don't have that cachet that a LeBron does or maybe somebody else does. Like I think KD signed it might have been a 2+1 or something like that when he was with the Warriors, or I forget exactly what it was. But if you're the elite of the elite, I think that makes sense. It's a little bit harder if you're just stepping into your own. You had your first big season, and you're like, this 4-year 106 looks pretty good right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be an all NBA player only one time and then to bet on yourself over and over again, it's like it could be an admiration. Obviously, we don't know that, and he doesn't think that, but you're right, it could be. So that makes a lot of sense. One other player I want to talk to contract wise. Contract talk is not the most exciting thing ever, obviously, but I feel like it has to be done. Mitchell Robinson, though, obviously is the team option going into it. We could actually not do that, make him a restricted free agent. Um, what do you think you would do if you were Mitch? And then what do you think the team wants to do?
Yeah, I mean, if I was Mitch, I think because I mean I forget who he's rep by now. He's had like 7 or 8 agents.
So
But
many.
yeah, he's had a lot. So, if I'm Mitch, if I'm his representative, I'm trying to push for some type of long-term deal for him. If I'm the team, I really want to see how this year plays out. I want to kind of qualify this. Like, I'm not down on Mitch at all. I still think he's super talented. He's super young, and this is what I want to see happen. I want to let Mitch play out this last year of his contract. I want to see him get another year under Kenny Payne's tutelage, and I want him to be healthy. And then I think we're in a better position to determine long term what is his role on this team and how comfortable do we feel investing in him financially. Because I saw a lot of people on Twitter say like, well, listen, if Nerlens Noel is killing it with the blocks and he's not making half the money that Mitch might make long term, does it make sense to just stay with him? Nerlens Noel, who listen, got us here, and when Mitch went down, he played. I think he was averaging over 2 blocks a game. He was the backbone of a defense that was top five
Yeah.
for a lot of the back end of our schedule.
Really
But
good over 3 stocks a game, too. You got almost a steal a game as well.
listen, he was great, but he got exposed in the playoffs a
He
bit.
can't
And
cover bigger dudes. Clint Capella
no,
will always torch him. If you're bigger, if you're wider than Noel, you will beat him.
yeah, it's true. And listen, and Mitch is not, a big guy by any stretch. But here's the thing: Mitch
Longer.
actually improved in rebounding this year. It wasn't like a big thing, but it was an area that he improved a lot. And Noel, I think he averaged maybe 4 or 5 boards a game, this season. I just think that I still really want to see what we have with Mitch, and I think the representatives will try and push for something. I think it would be smart for us to just let this year play out, let Kenny Payne work with him, see what he can do with him. And it's not like we can't extend him in the middle of the season. Also, if things are looking really good, I just
Right.
think to do it this summer after the injury concerns. I've always been worried with his ankle ever since he was a rookie. He falls awkwardly. It feels like his ankles have no support, and so I just want to see that kind of play out.
There's two things about Mitch. One is that the thing you just said, the ankle thing. I feel like there's something too. If you're like 7 foot 7'1" and like your legs are like a little too thin, you are more fragile.
Right.
Just naturally, like the human body, most people aren't that tall for a reason. The other thing is that he did on the bright side put on like 25 to 30 pounds. Did you see the Instagram post where it said he was like 270 instead of
Yeah, I
240?
did. I did. Yeah.
Hopefully that is mostly all muscle and or leg strength.
No, yeah,
um,
that would be great. That would definitely be great.
Yeah. Also, the thing about Noel with the blocks and all that stuff, it's like when you are going for blocks all the time, you are giving up rebounds. So it's like he only would get 4 or 5 a game because he's going for the blocks. And if those blocks lead to fast breaks, that's awesome. If those blocks just lead to a second chance point that you're out of position for, then feast or famine for the most part. Geoff, how often do you tweet for Daily Knicks? Are you just a contributor? Did they ever give you control of the steering wheel?
I never get control of the steering. It's probably a good thing. I listen. I like writing every now and then, and I like throwing a tweet out there. But I'm not creative like these guys. Like you, the tweets you guys put out like are super funny, and like they get mad
Thank
retweets,
you.
like a whole bunch of likes. But like that's not my steez. Like I get in where I fit in.
Yeah, same. I actually don't do the BKE tweets at all. Vin does most of the designs, the producer that's not talking, and Angelo, the other bald guy that usually does this with me, does most of the crazy stuff that he tweets. I just try to give answers and hope for the best, honestly.
I had a real quick question. Is Angelo, did he used to have Bring It to NY
Bring it
or
to New York. It's the same
so
same dudes.
I'm pretty sure yeah, I could be wrong on this, but like he was doing clothing too, right?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
actually made this shirt and this shirt that I'm wearing.
So he's I think he's the creator. That is very, very cool shirt. But I think he's the creator of probably one of my favorite shirts. Unfortunately, it's too small for me now. But he had the one with the print of the mellow shot he hit on Easter over
Yes,
Luol Deng, and it said, be mellow. I wore this out like,
Vin actually does all of our designs. Vin made almost every shirt.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I just remember that shirt, and everywhere I wore, people would be like, bro, like, where'd you get that? And I was like, listen, it's the site, like, Bring It to NY, like, they make cool stuff. So yeah, shout out to him for sure.
Thank you for the shameless promotion. Anyone wants to look up any of the shirts we have, it's bignickenergy.com now. It also should have some of the Bring It to New York stuff on there still. The only reason I asked if you did actually have control over the Twitter at all is because I wanted to ask you about the hypothetical team that you guys tweeted on June 10th. You know what I'm talking about, obviously.
Of course, man. Yeah, this was quite the conversation in the Slack channel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, Mitchell Robinson probably is my current favorite Knick. So seeing Miles Turner there instead, a great player. He's a better shooter, obviously. It did hurt me a little bit. And then DeMar DeRozan, I'm totally cool with. But so the five, so everyone knows, is Colin Sexton, RJ Barrett, DeMar DeRozan, Julius Randle, Miles Turner. I have a major bone to pick about Colin Sexton.
Yeah.
That dude gets made fun of by players on other teams telling his teammates they're never going to get the ball because he's such a ball hog. And Colin Sexton to me is almost the epitome of a good stats, bad team player. I know you said you weren't the one that tweeted it. Maybe you don't side with them. Maybe you do agree with them, but can you give your take on the potential team for next year?
Yeah.
Entirely hypothetical, obviously.
No. It's totally cool. So like, Brad, who's our site leader, I don't know if he tweeted that one out, but he's a good dude. He definitely knows his stuff. I think a lot of times with the Twitter handle, one of the things that we try and do is really spark conversation, right? And like, you know, this tweet clearly sparked a lot of conversation.
Yes, it did.
What I would say, so I'm gonna critique the tweak a little bit, but defend it also as well. So, I'm not a huge Colin Sexton guy as well. The one thing I will say about him, because when I was doing like a little bit of like scouting profiles for Elite Sports NY, that Kevin Knox draft was one that I really, really went into a deep dive on. And Colin Sexton was like a guy that I had initial thoughts that like he would really only be best suited as a backup point guard, maybe a backup guy that could come in and defend. Because his calling card coming out of college at Alabama was that he was a really good defender.
Right.
But the interesting thing, and I've talked to a couple of reporters that cover the Cavs too, and Colin is like he's a very polarizing player. But the interesting thing is like if you look at him statistically, and I know that the game is not just played on a stat sheet. He really has improved every year he's been in the league, and he's improved his shooting numbers. He came out of college as essentially, I don't want to say a non-shooter, but he wasn't really a good shooter.
He
And
hovered around 30% usually from three.
right, and I believe he's at 37 or maybe 39. He's improved a lot in that area. It's actually funny because defensively is probably one of his weakest areas, which was a calling card in college. Essentially, what I want to say about Colin Sexton is that from what I know and what I've heard about him, he's an extremely tireless worker.
Yeah.
So he's very hardworking. He works on his game. Clearly, he's got to rein it in with the hero ball. That's not good. Darius Garland, I think, is probably a much better option for them, leading and driving the offense. He's a better
Agreed.
pure shooter. He made a step this year, which I think the Cavs are looking forward to as well. So, yeah, listen, I'm not a big Colin Sexton guy. I didn't love that starting five, of course, but the one thing I do want to say though about just like potential starting lineups in general, I think as Knicks fans, we do kind of have to, I don't want to say get comfortable with the fact that a Tibbs led team, like I'm sure you remember that Yaron Weitzman article that kind of painted the front office not necessarily in a great light and basically said that Tibbs wanted to trade everybody and their mother for like proven vets at the start of the
Yeah.
season, right? Like he was like, bring back Marcus Morris, bring back
Before
this
this
guy.
year,
Like,
he was never known as someone that actually appreciated young talent.
right. So I do think that we kind of have to, and now here's the thing. If you're going into the front office and you're having these conversations with Wes and Leon, Tibbs might actually have more leverage now because Tibbs might go to them and say, look at what I did with this team. And we won 41 games. Get me some guys with a little bit more talent, maybe a little bit more proven, see what I can do. Now, this is where Leon has to turn around and say he's got to basically foster an environment that brings out the best in Tibbs, and he's also got to rein Tibbs in when he's being crazy.
Yeah.
And that's Leon's. Honestly, that's where Leon makes his check. Like that's going to be it. But I do think, honestly, if we think about what the starting five might look like next year, I really do think it. I don't think it's going to look like that, but I do think it's going to have some form of, let's say, like like a veteran who is semi one dimensional, right? Like
Okay.
I do think that those are guys that appeal to Tibbs in a certain way. So even
Are
though I
you
don't, co-sign a lineup specifically like that, I do think it's going to look somewhat like I do think DeRozan is going to be a guy that we really look at. And I know a lot of Knicks fans aren't going to like that, but
I'm totally cool with that. That guy can get his own bucket. We could have really used that in the playoffs.
yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, offense is going to be a big thing to be addressed in the offseason for sure.
Yeah. I would definitely say I would be cool with DeRozan. Instead of Colin Sexton, because when you say one-dimensional vet, I'm assuming you mean like a point guard that can run the offense, or were you talking more of a defensive-minded person?
Yeah, I guess it could be either. I would say both. I mean, like I feel like it's almost funny. Like I was kind of thinking of DeRozan in a sense that way, but I think it could be either like a defensive minded point guard or someone who's a little bit more shoot first. If you just look at Tibbs's teams historically, like
That's a
even if you
tongue
think
twister
about
right there. Tibbs'
like
teams.
I know, right? And even if you think about like Kirk Heinrich, right? Like there
Yeah.
was a lot of guys who were just like, and I'm sure Bulls fans were equally as frustrated with him continuing to start Heinrich, even though he definitely had some good years for them, as we were with Elf, right? But Tibbs would give you the same explanation. Oh, he does things that get us going, or like just because it doesn't show up on
Starts
the
with
stat
intensity.
sheet. Yeah, yeah, that too, of course.
I was gonna ask if I was to throw three names out there for you, most realistic. I'm not gonna because most people probably would say Chris Paul out of these three, which also seems crazy, but Lonzo Ball, Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul, which would be the most realistic point guard for us next year.
Oh man. So like realistic in the sense that they're more likely to actually be on the roster next year.
Right, exactly. Like we're actually proud. We actually will go for them versus less like throwing all of our chips in one basket. Like I don't think we're gonna pay Chris Paul 40 million.
Right. Um, you know what, man? I'm gonna go. You know what? I'll stick with the original. I was going back and forth between Lowry and Ball. I'm gonna go with Lonzo. I do think that there's something there with just like him being in a big market, and I know he said he's happy in New Orleans. Um,
He's
I
the
don't
exact
know.
opposite of his dad. He says all the right things all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a pretty subdued dude as well. Like I think he just wants to. I think he just wants to play ball. He clearly wants to be seen too, which is cool. I mean, like, what player doesn't?
Yeah.
I wonder what's the number in terms of restricted free agency that would have to be offered to him for the Pelicans to say no, or if there's some type of sign and trade that can be worked in there or something like that. Lowry is super interesting to me, man. Like and my co-host that does Hoops Addicts Anonymous, Chip Murphy. He's a huge Kyle Lowry fan. I love Kyle too. I just don't think at the end of the day he's going to choose to play the twilight of his career in New York, even though I'm sure he has respect for the Knicks organization. I just think that we're like a couple of steps away from being where he wants to be in terms of contending for a championship.
Yeah,
So I would go with Lonzo.
that's fair. I agree with you honestly. Lonzo Ball does seem like the most realistic and attainable. The last thing I had one other thing in my mind and I totally forgot. Oh, would you actually want Miles Turner over Mitchell Robinson
Listen, man, Miles Turner.
for the price as well? Because one's 20 mil, one's like 1.6. So
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's Pacers guys that I've talked to over the past 2 years, and they've been impressed with Miles Turner. It's always been a tough fit between him and Sabonis together on the court, but
yeah,
he's perennially, leading the league in blocks. He's obviously a very good defensive player. I know he's stretched himself out to the 3-point line, but doesn't really hit that shot consistently. Um,
yeah,
I
he's
don't
turning
know.
like into Brook Lopez like me. Like Brook Lopez can shoot it, but he probably shouldn't be always be out there.
Yeah, I think I would still stick with Mitch. And honestly, it's really the price tag that's probably gonna make me feel that way. Just because I still feel like, let's say Mitch fails, right? To me, the options that might be available at that time, if you just have to get a rim protecting big, are still maybe better long term in terms of assets or in terms of money you can allocate to other positions on the court where you clearly need an upgrade
Yeah,
instead of just bringing on Miles Turner's contract now where you're really hamstrung. Like, yes, he's really good and he's an upgrade over Mitch right now, but like I still worry about like, okay, long term, how does that, if he's still going to be the same player, um, because he's older than Mitch too. So like if he's still going to be the same player in 2 or 3 years and we haven't upgraded other positions, I think that's going to hurt us.
right. Either way, we would need a point guard or someone that can actually facilitate them into the offense. And I know Thibs will never actually play like this, but Julius Randle probably would actually be more beneficial from either a stretch big or actually playing the five altogether.
Yeah.
I don't think Thibs will ever actually do that because he does love having the rim protecting center, obviously. Geoff, last thing before I let you go, did you see the change in the rule today potentially? That they're like going to try to finally stop the Trae Youngs and the James Hardens of the world with a pump fake and then you jump into the defender. It was
Dude,
tweeted by Shams today.
I did not see that, but that's like that's music to my ears, man. Like, and it's tough because honestly, man, I see it both ways. Like, Harden and Trey, as much as they frustrate me, and I honestly do think it's not fun to watch. There is a level of skill involved in that, and there's a level of kind of cleverness that like think about like the
It's
classic.
intelligent to take advantage of the rules that exist.
Yeah, and think about the classic like Chris Paul at half court when someone's trying to get him and then he throws up the
Yeah,
shot and you're like, wow, how did he do that? Like, you know, but I do listen just from a watchability standpoint, like if you're trying to get the more casual fan involved, no one wants to see Trey Young shooting 20 free throws a game.
no
Like
shot.
no one wants to see James Harden shooting 20 plus whatever it is, right? Like you want more up and down, a more fluid game. So clearly, they had to do something about this. I'm happy that it's going to happen. And usually, I'll say this, to the NBA and I guess the officiating's defense, when they do try and implement a rule, like it may not be consistent across the board, but they usually do a pretty good job the next season, like getting after it right away. Like
Yeah,
remember the whole clearing space when Kawhi hurt his leg, like that was a huge point of emphasis for the officiating crews that the next season. So I'm sure they'll be on this, and it's important. And listen, no one's going to cry for Trey Young and James Harden. Those guys are more than talented enough to figure out how to adjust their game, so they'll be fine.
absolutely. And like I said, they're both very intellectual dudes. That's why they even thought to do that in the first place. I did see on Twitter today that actually it also might indirectly benefit the Knicks directly because Emmanuel quickly obviously started doing that more and more. He
Yeah,
started like going away from the floater and the threes and actually trying to pump fake on the three and then draw the contact inside the 2 point line. And because he's Emmanuel quickly and not Trey or James Harden, he wasn't getting the calls. So anything to stop him from doing what he couldn't be really doing anyway, I'm also all for.
I agree. I'm with that as well.
Geoff, before I let you go, I know that your work is on a bunch of different sites. Where do you want to plug specifically?
Yeah, man. Thanks. Yeah, I'd say Daily Knicks, for sure. I think I have an article coming out either tomorrow or the next day. I work in a school system, so I'm looking forward to having the summer where I can write more, and be a little bit more active and involved. The Hoops Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm always looking for guests that just like to talk ball. And Playgrounder, my guy Matt Esposito. We haven't been writing on there in a while, but he runs that site. He does a great job with it and put a bunch of cool and dope people together. So yeah, that's where you can find the majority of my stuff.
Awesome. And hey, man, if you ever want any of us on, let me know. We'll always be available as well. Uh,
Absolutely, man.
Thank you again, everyone, for Big Knick Energy. Check out our sponsor, Empire Original Designs, at jointheempire.com, the East Coast #1 challenge coin manufacturer, home of challenge coins, lapels, pins, patches, keychains, bottle openers, and more. Mention our podcast, Big Knick Energy, via email for 5% off purchases. Once again, that's jointheempire.com. Make sure to like and subscribe to BKE Pod on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Let's go Knicks, and let's kill the offseason. Geoff, any last words?
No, that's it. I think you said it perfectly. I can't wait for this off season. I can't wait for the draft, man, to see what happens there. And I know we'll all be interested to see what goes down.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing my draft research next week. I was trying to last as long as possible to watch the playoffs, but the more I watch the Nets, the more sad I get. So I'm just going to jump into it. Let's go Knicks, everyone. Peace.